Hi. I'm in a different room today. This is the Sunshine Studio that I call it my Sunshine Studio. It's the playroom, crafting playroom. Okay, this next section is called Emily Crane, and it's too long to read the whole time. But there's a picture I want to show you before I start. This is Lorenzo Watson and Emily Crane, and the pictures of their children, the ones that they have pictures of. So, there they are. Let's see, Emily Crane, yes. Every summer, the Watsons made a trip to Kenosha, Utah, where they visited Lissy's uncle, Collins Hakes. They always remained a week or two and dried fruit to bring back with them. Usually they saw Lissy's Aunt Helen, Callister, who lived in Fillmore. There was a young girl teaching school in Fillmore, Millard County, Utah, whom Watson very much admired. She was energetic, ambitious, and an excellent worker in the community. Watson felt that she would be a good helpmeet for him, and he very earnestly considered plural marriage. Because he believed in the principle of plural marriage and its sacredness, Watson talked it over with Lissy, and with her approval, he asked Miss Emily Crane to become his second wife. This is in quotes. Why do people honor the laws of polygamous Moses, bask in the wisdom of the polygamous Solomon, sing the songs of the polygamous David, pray to enter into the gates of the city wherein are written the names of the 12 sons of the polygamous Jacob, to go to the bosom of the polygamous Abraham, and curse the polygamous Brigham Young. In the early days, and so that's the end of the quote, sorry. In the early days of the church, the doctrine of plural marriage was introduced through divine revelation. The practice of plural marriage has never been general in the church, and at no time have more than 3% of the families in the church practiced it. When the practice began, it did not contravene any of the laws of the territory or nation under which the people lived. Subsequently, laws were enacted by the federal government making the practice illegal. These laws were contested in the courts and their constitutionality questioned. The Mormons took the position that the laws constituted an infringement on the exercise of religious liberty and freedom of conscience. The Supreme Court of the United States denied the Mormons' contention and upheld the validity of the laws. Plural marriage was considered by the church to be a very sacred privilege. Only those who were regarded as being worthy and exemplary in life, in their conduct, and in their keeping of the laws of the church were permitted to enter into it. It was surrounded by church limitations and safeguards, which were calculated to invest it with lofty, idealistic attributes. Emily Adeline Crane was born at Bolinghurst, England, the 6th of June, 1855, the oldest child of George Crane and Emily Savy. The father was from Oxford, a painter and glazier by trade, having been apprenticed when he was very young. All his family had gone to Canada, Galt, Ontario. But as his apprenticeship was not completed, he remained in London, where after his marriage he established a home. His wife Emily went to the home of her parents at Bolinhurst for the birth of their first child. When Emily, the baby, was only 5, the mother died after the birth of her 4th child. Little Emily remembered vividly the day when the baby was 6 weeks old and the mother seemed better after her serious childbed illness. The father took his wife in his arms to a long mirror to show her how pretty she was, and she died in his arms. The father was beside himself with grief. He took the 4 little babies to their grandmother in Bolinhurst, 50 miles from London. He paid her for their keep and went to see them whenever his labors would permit. The grandparents were Orthodox Baptists, and so the children had very strict religious training. The Sabbath day was strictly one of worship. No toys were in sight on that day. Services were attended, and then, after tea, all would sit around the table and take turns reading the Bible. On these occasions, the grandparents acted as teachers, explaining and simplifying passages too difficult for childish minds. Then 1 or 2 of Dr. Watts' old-fashioned hymns were sung. Prayers were offered, the children taking turns with their elders. Emily and her sister Alice attended a penny school. That is, they paid a penny a day for instruction in a private school. The grandmother taught the girls how to make lace on a pillow with bodkins, and they became so proficient at making it that the lace was taken to the city of Bedford and sold. In time, this brought in quite a tidy sum, and the grandmother took the girls out of school so that they could spend all their time making lace. They would sit all day at their pillows under their little bodies. They would sit all day at their pillows until their little bodies ached. Eagerly, they awaited the afternoon when the grandmother took a long nap. Then the girls would leave their lace for an hour's respite. Emily ran to the penny school, eager for instruction, but Alice sought release in play. This was a very precarious business, as the grandmother was strict, and should she find them gone, dire would be the results. However, the sleep of age saved the children from punishment. Emily received some beautiful jeweled bobbins as a prize at the Bedford Fair, but at the time she prized them little, for the lace making had become hateful to her when she longed so for schooling. In the penny school, the girls made friends with those who belonged to the Episcopal Church, the Church of England, and expressed a desire to attend that church. The grandfather intended to raise the children as Orthodox Baptists. However, their father came to their rescue in this matter. Their father, saying they should be allowed to go where they pleased. He belonged to no church and felt that they should be given freedom in their choice of worship. In this church they gained a thorough knowledge of the Gospels and received religious training that was of great value to them all through life. The curate and his wife bestowed much attention upon them because they were motherless and away from their father. Emily always felt that it was these good people who helped shape her characters and who left lasting impressions for good upon their lives. When the father came down weekends, the girls wanted him to attend church with them, but he had no desire to do so. As they grew older, they felt that his lack of religion was the only flaw in their otherwise perfect father. And so, after one of his visits, they decided to pray that he might turn to some church. This was after a Christmas visit, and he did not come again until June. Imagine their delight when, upon the occasion of the June visit, they discovered that their prayers had been answered. It came about in this fashion. At the table, the father refused to drink either tea or coffee when presented by the grandmother. He said that he now belonged to a church that did not approve of tea or coffee. The grandmother asked what faith this could be, but he avoided answering. He later asked the children to accompany him a short way toward the depot. There was a small barn on the Stavey place. The father took them inside. He told them that he wished to bless them. Then he asked Emily, the oldest, to stand on the left side and Alice on the right. With his arms crossed, he blessed them as Jacob of old. He followed the same procedure with the two boys. The children were much impressed. The next visit was at Christmas, when he told the grandparents that he had joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He gave Emily a Book of Mormon to read, and then he told them he had a new mother for them, a Welsh seamstress who always was a member of the church. This information caused a great consternation in the Savey household. The grandparents felt disgraced that he should join this church, then in such ill repute. Then there were the children. The baby boy Owen was only 6 weeks old when the grandmother had taken him, and now he was to be taken from her. The father agreed to take the children one at a time to soften the blow, and the grandmother was asked to come to London as often as she liked to visit the children. She did try this, but she disliked the great city. She enjoyed attending the Metropolis Tabernacle, where the great C.H. Sturgeon held forth. But the day came when she parted pathetically with the children, never to see them again. The father was president of 2 branches of the church, Lambeth and Wainsworth, and so the children saw much of the Mormon elders. They enjoyed these contacts and the many challenges that had come into their lives. The stepmother made them lovely clothes from their mother's dresses, and they were very happy. The father now began planning to migrate to Utah in the United States. And on the last day of June 1868, when Emily was 13, they embarked on the SS Minnesota with 530 other converts. On the fifth day out, this company of many nationalities joined with the crew in celebrating the 4th of July. It was a very warm day aboard ship. Emily became tired and so crept under one of the suspended lifeboats for a nap. She was wearing a taffeta dress made from one of her mother's. The heat had brought the pitch between the cracks of the flooring, and when Emily arose from her nap, she left a strip of her dress along every crack on which she had lain. She was greatly embarrassed to appear on deck in the remains of her dress, which now resembled a hula skirt. That was the afternoon of her first celebration of the day, which from now on was to be one of the great days in her new homeland. The Minnesota made a record trip of 11 days. The converts landed at Castle Gardens, now the Battery, in New York. Emily remembered New York as the place where a gawky youth referred to her and her sister as greenhorns. She had never heard the expression, so the dart failed to hurt. They were all placed aboard cattle cars for the journey west. Each family had space in a car where they made their beds and set up equipment for preparing meals. Just before they reached Laramie, Wyoming, they were transferred to other cars. At Laramie, they were taken off as the road was not yet completed to Rock Springs. I'm just trying to figure out if that's the train replacing cattle cars. I'm imagining a train ride in my head. Okay, you have to figure it out all yourselves. While they were aboard the cattle cars, many of them were stricken with dysentery and died. Emily remembered one hot day when her father wrapped 14 corpses in their winding sheets and took them, from off the train for burial. Yay, I had trains in my head, and I was correct. Anyway, that's what, I'm just still going to imagine that. He had been made captain for the company, so many duties developed upon him. The children had always drunk tea, and the father felt it unwise to take it from them until they had become acclimated. This undoubtedly saved their lives, as they drank no water which was not boiled. At Laramie, they were met by mule teams, prairie schooners, and supplies. The Cranes were assigned to John R. Murdoch's company of 50. This allowed the father to spend more time with his family, and he explained to them the geography of the country over which they were traveling. As each day unfolded, they gained greater admiration for their father because he knew so much about this country he had never seen. One evening, he told them about the cut in Wyoming called Devil's Gate, and that they should see it next day. To their delight, he climbed up to the rugged cut, the only person to do so, and waved to them from the top. They felt they should burst with pride. One day he asked his eldest son, Fred, if he should like to be baptized in the Platte River next day. The son consented, and so was the first of the 4 children to be immersed in the water in the new faith. At night, when the great circle of covered wagons was formed and devotions began, the children were in their glory. They had sung in the children's choir of the Episcopal Church, and now they loved to let their childish voices ring. They were thrilled beyond measure when their English trebles joined the Welsh and Scottish voices in the beloved Mormon hymn of the trail, "All is well, all is well." They reached Salt Lake August 19, 1868, and were met by friends who had preceded them in the year before. William Driver, a druggist, and his family took them home for dinner. There, for the first time, they saw homemade soap, home-woven carpets, and sight of sights, humans eating corn off the cob. Also, on the dinner table, in a glass bowl, were whole beets in vinegar. Emily had no idea what they were, but supposing them to be luscious fruit, took one. To her dismay, she could not eat it. Her strict grandmother had never allowed any of them to leave a thing on their plates. To consume this would be agony, so after some maneuvering, Emily slipped the beet into the deep pocket of her white muslin dress. Later, she accidentally sat on it, so it was consumed externally. The first night they were in Salt Lake, Oscar Young, a friend of the father's, took them to the Salt Lake Theater. The father, a lover of drama, was thrilled with the play, and the children sitting beside him in the parquet were thrilled to their toes as they witnessed Under the Gaslights. Under the Gaslights is in quotes. The stepmother was shortly confined with her first child, Mary Ellen, while the father and family lived in a rented house and worked on the Union Pacific Railroad. He remained at this work until the Golden Spike was driven the next May. The father's trade was highly specialized for so new a country. Now the railroad was completed, he had no work, and their goodly sum of cash was fast diminishing. Brigham Young was anxious to have the remote sections of Utah colonized. Farming land was cheap in Millard County, and as a friend offered to transport the family, bag and baggage, for $20, the father decided to go. He knew nothing about farming, less about irrigation, which was absolutely necessary in this desert country. Nothing daunted, they went south to a Mormon settlement, Kenash, so named for the Indian chief Kenash. Emily and Alice were left at Meadows, a small town between Fillmore and Kenash, until a home could be established. The father, having a good education for that day, was immediately engaged to teach the public schools, and so Emily had the experience of going to school to her own father. She was now baptized into the faith by Alexander Melville. Babies came fast to the new Crane home. The father was called to return to England on a mission. The Welsh temper of the stepmother could not restrain itself under so much responsibility and hardship. Emily, sensing the situation, went to live with Baldy Watts and his wife. They could pay her nothing, but Mrs. Watts was so appreciative of the girl's help that she took one of her hand-woven linsey, that's a wool and linen, sheets from her bed and made it into a dress for Emily. In Canoche, the children were ridiculed for their foreign ways. Their hats, instead of the slanted sunbonnets, and little black strap slippers instead of the home cobbled shoes. This matter soon took care of itself, as the clothes were worn out and the slippers were replaced with the wide cowhide shoes, which they had to get used to whether they liked it or not, just as they did the fare of water gravy, fried salt pork, and sorghum. Okay, that's a little bit of starting out with Emily Crane and her young life, and I'll read some more of her a little later. Okay, thanks. Bye.